Carlos Nelson with Cascade Media, and this is a continuation on our HBCU President Series. And tonight's guest is the president of Langston University, Mr. Kent Smith. How are you doing, President Smith?
Pretty good, brother. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you on. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Originally, I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Born and reared. Both of my parents my mother was from Baton Rouge. My father was from New Orleans. They met in college at Southern University, HBCU, and one of the few HBCUs in the state of Louisiana. They met, fell in love, got married. And 4 years after getting married, comes their firstborn, and that was me. I'm the oldest of three, have two younger brothers who still reside in Louisiana. In college, I majored in secondary education, taught middle and high school. By the way, both of my parents were educators. Father was an elementary school teacher. Mother was a middle and high school French teacher and eventually a guidance counselor. And my parents begged me not to major in education because they wanted me to have a better life economically than them. So what does every son do whose parents does not want them to major in education? You major in education. But really, it was in my blood. I had a knack for it. I was a substitute school teacher while I was in college and really found out if you can survive as a substitute and really thrive and like it, you can do the real thing. So finished college and taught history and biology in middle and high school for a couple of years, got out of education and got into the banking world. I wish that I could tell you there was some prolific reason as to why or how I got into banking. I had friends who majored in business when they were in undergrad, and they got jobs in the banking world. And at the time, the bank was paying significantly more money for their manager trainee program than we were making as educators. And it didn't require you to have a business degree. So friends encouraged me to apply. I applied at the bank, got on, had a pretty good but short-lived career in banking, worked my way up to assistant vice president. When I say short-lived, just a number of years. And I mentioned that only because while I was working in the banking area, are you familiar with a program called Upward Bound, a federal TRIO program?
Been familiar with Upward Bound for some time, yes.
Okay, so I was in Upward Bound program at Southern University when I was in high school. When I got into banking, I started handling the banking affairs of the director of the Upward Bound program that I had attended while I was in high school. And after a couple of years, she came to me one day. I was doing a loan or something for her. And she said, hey, what are you going to do with the rest of your career? Do you ever think about getting back into education? I said, I do. I miss it. But I have a wife. I have children at this point. And, I need to be able to make ends meet. And it just doesn't pay what I'm making in banking. She said, well, I'd like to make you an offer. I want to see if you could refuse it. And she said, I'm willing to hire you as my assistant director in the Upward Bound program. I'll match your salary, but along with that, I'll pay for you to get your master's degree if you're willing to do it. And I was like, show me the way. And so I quit my job and went to work for her in the Upward Bound program. And as fate would have it, my job in Upward Bound was to work with the high school juniors and seniors to help them with the admissions packets and to take them on the college tours in the summertime. And her husband was working on his doctorate at the time. He was a dean at Southern University and he was working on his doctorate. And they both had known me at that point for a long time. And her husband said to me, hey, you seem to have a knack for working with the older students. If you're going to really, really do well in education, you really should think about a career in higher education. And I had never thought about that. Even, I know that sounds weird, being an education major, being on a college campus, but I had never thought about it, nor had anyone spoken with me about it. And And he said, well, you have to get a doctorate degree. And I said, no, thank you. I'm not done with the master's. This is it for me. I didn't know anybody other than professors in college, certainly no family members who had doctorate degrees. Other than we had a few lawyers in the family, but true PhD, EDD had none of that in my family. And he kept working on me. And Colorado State University had just started an exchange program with Southern University. Colorado State needed Black students, Southern needed white students, vice versa, same thing with professors. And I applied and was the second student to go from Southern University to Colorado State to work on the doctorate degree. Went to Colorado State thinking I would earn the doctorate and go right back to Southern University and work at Southern my entire career. Right before I graduated, Colorado State hired me in Black Student Services. I was an assistant director, and they also allowed me to teach in ethnic studies. So now I'm teaching on the university level as an adjunct, and so getting a plethora of experience. From there, after a few years, went to work as the director of multicultural affairs at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, which is why I know a little bit about Ohio. We've spoken about that. Worked there for 3 years, then went on to become Dean of Students at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. From there, went on to become Vice President for Student Affairs, went back to Ohio for VP for Student Affairs at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio.
In Athens.
Yeah. And after almost 7 years there, had the great fortune and opportunity to apply for presidency at Langston University, and feel very fortunate that I was offered the opportunity, and it's been 10 years later now.
You're the 16th president.
Yes.
How do you plan to change the culture? Or what are you doing? Not how do you, what are you doing to change the culture?
Sure. Well, as you know, changing culture is very, very difficult, let alone as an HBCU president. The environment is such where a lot of people would like to keep everything the same. And I think the first step, in my view, that comes with changing culture is getting a true lay of the land and allowing people to get to know you and you getting to know them, to know why things are the way that they are. I think a lot of people attempt to make change for change's sake rather than truly understanding why things are the way they are and how they could be. And so the direct answer is you do it day by day, you do it methodically, but you have to build a lot of relationships, and the challenge for an HBCU president like myself, who's not a graduate of Langston University, and while I'm a two-time HBCU graduate, Southern University, somehow for some people, I'm not quite HBCU-ish.
Hey, man.
Whatever that means.
Nothing. Let's move forward with talk about the $4.6 million balances for the students that were enrolled, how you cleared their debt. Talk about that, and talk about that pandemic semester with zero debt.
Sure. Well, to begin with, we are one of the most affordable, not just HBCUs, universities, not only in the region, but in the country. I think about a year and a half ago, we were ranked third in the nation in affordability for institutions with 4,000 or less students. But even with that, affordability, the reality is over 70% of our students are first generation college students. And what that means is, even though we're affordable in comparison, for a lot of our students, it doesn't feel very affordable. And and for most of our students, the reason they leave is not because they're not having academic success. It's not because they don't want to be here. It's not because they don't want to complete their degree. The majority of our students leave because they have a balance and they can't pay their bill. And so, as part of the HERF dollars that we received from the federal government, there are some parameters that they put in place that said, you can do some things to assist students doing the pandemic semesters in certain ways. And one of those things where it's perfectly legal and passes, muster of the dollars we received, that we could pay off the balances of students who attended in the pandemic semesters. And so, quite frankly, it was a pretty easy decision for us to make. We paid off the balance for a little over 1,300 students, as you mentioned, a little over $4.2 million. And for a lot of our students, that's the difference of them returning or not, or even if they were working, as most of our students do, to save money to pay their balance, they now were able to either help themselves in a greater capacity or help their families, as most of our students are doing. So we felt pretty good about it, and certainly the response was amazing from our students who we paid balances off for.
All right, let's talk about your upcoming presidential gala during homecoming, and what that's going to look like. Langston versus Texas Wesleyan.
Yes, Wesleyan. Yep.
Yeah. Run it down, Kent.
Sure. Well, to begin with, as speaking of money for students, our largest scholarship fundraiser annually is the President's Scholarship Gala. It's an event that we held in Oklahoma City, and literally, it's a black tie event. We do bring in musical talent, but overall, the purpose of the event is to raise dollars for our students, and probably about 96% of the proceeds raised go directly to student scholarships and help maintain students with balances and to keep them in school.
What I would have you do, I haven't done this in previous interviews, but Glenn does all my presidential interviews. I feel I don't give the presidents enough dignity the way I do.
Come on, man, give us some love.
Yeah, I am, but I'm saying, you know how I talk to you off camera. So this is the first time I'm doing this. I would like for you to talk to the corporate community, and especially talk to Black businessmen about how important it is to give back to Black universities. But now I'm asking you to reach out specifically for your university.
Sure, I certainly appreciate the opportunity, but part of the obligation I have in representing the only HBCU in the state of Oklahoma, but I also have an obligation to represent all. I'm happy when others do well, and I want to be supportive. As a two-time graduate, and not only that, having two parents who graduated from an HBCU, I know personally what an HBCU education can do. And so my pitch is very, very simple. If you believe and you're looking for an opportunity to put dollars that are going to make a difference, whether you attended an HBCU or not, whether or not you are a college graduate, there's no greater opportunity, I believe, than helping a young person to obtain a formal education. Some will say, and I realize, a 4-year degree may not be for everyone, but for most of the students that I work with and have worked with over the years, them earning at least a bachelor's degree totally changes their projected income over their lifespan. Doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly makes it a lot more attainable and more easily accessed. And so if someone is really and truly looking to uplift anyone, be it African-American students, and that's the other misnomer, is that HBCUs are just for African-American students.
Cut you off for a minute.
Yep.
Lincoln, they have the most diverse HBCU in the nation, with about 49% of their student body is diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for the cutoff.
No. Point where there are other HBCUs, and that's one of the points. The reality that a lot of people miss is part of the reason that we exist is that, for instance, Langston University, we were founded in 1897, long before Oklahoma became a state, gained statehood. And the reality is the University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State University at that time, rather than admitting African Americans to attend, they were perfectly okay with creating separate but equal higher educational institutions. And even back then, education wasn't for everyone. Everyone did not have an opportunity to get a higher education degree. And so even back then, Langston University was open to all, because all Native Americans, all were not having the opportunity to uplift themselves.
I'm back on the financial situation. I want to talk to you about endowments and your endowment. And I got my little cheat sheet here that the real interviewer left me. And he's got here about Black endowments at the Black colleges in general, but one glaring thing pointing out that the University of Minnesota's endowment equals all of the Black universities put together. They have more money in there. Talk about that a little bit if you can.
Sure. And again, it's something that we have to build. And while right now, HBCUs are sort of cool from a media standpoint, and you see some of the billionaires who've put money into select HBCUs, but the reality is that the overwhelming majority of HBCUs are one step away from closing, or very close to it. Maybe that's not fair.
Now, let me say this. I have private conversations with, you presidents, athletic directors, and all of this. And when you dive deep into it, a lot of our HBCUs, the sports and things, they have to have volunteer assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Because they can't but we don't really want to talk about that.
And I think you're talking facts.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's why I'm bringing this out. The closed mouth don't get fed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a wonderful thing that a person like Deion Sanders is bringing to the table. As I talk to you off camera about the things that Cascade Media has to offer that you knew nothing about as a Black person, not just as a president, we serve the Black community. Right. And we've got to try to come together to solve some of these issues. And most of our issues are financial.
Right.
And most of our issues we can solve ourselves if we woke.
Yep.
So
I think it's twofold, and it's probably more fold than that. But the things that come to mind is the first thing is we as Blacks have to learn to support each other. I find too often, if I'm just being honest, when I look out on social media and I see criticisms either of me or of I'll take Langston, of the university, 99% of them are coming from us. And most of which are not true, but it's just, we talk a whole lot about how much we love our institution when it's homecoming. But when you talk about fundraising, giving back to the institution, things get awfully quiet pretty quickly. I mean, we do have, some good people who are giving, but I think we have to retrain our minds as Black folk to realize that something that's all Black is not necessarily bad. Because we hurt ourselves sometimes.
President Smith, we talked about this off camera a little bit. And it's very hard to talk about these difficult situations and people not take offense. When I'm pointing things out about our middle class and I told you that we're on this nonprofit, the first thing come out their mouth, not me. Because they're so close to the forest, they can't see the trees. And I asked you about the word boycott. And I said, that's been taken out of the lexicon. And when that type stuff is being done, that weakens your approach to quite a few. When you're strong, you can negotiate and get some things.
No doubt at all.
And so uh, I'm going to end this with Cascade Media. We're committed to our community. I think our private conversations, I think we're committed. And now bringing our Black universities with all that they have to offer, to have access to our worldwide platforms and our other platforms so that they can get more exposure for what we're doing. You look at the major news and what have you, they're bringing their professors from their universities and this and that, and they don't even bother to try to check to see what we know. And then when you look at the big scheme of things, you see hidden figures, you see hidden this, you see that, because we haven't gotten exposure. From my perspective, 65% of all inventions have been made by Black people. You just don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a strong media, having strong HBCUs that are educating us, that give you that nurturing. I told you I went to Central State, but I started off at Petersburg at Virginia State.
Wow.
But I didn't have financial problems. I had educational problems. I had an 0.7 grade point average my first semester because I thought people were just smart.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know you had to study. Coming from New York, coming from the inner city, being a sports person, you think I'm making the sports, that does the trick. It doesn't. Right. But when I went to that HBCU, it was nurturing. Very nurturing. Some of my teammates went to Syracuse where they had to have a Black student union. There was nothing for them. Yep. Everybody at Virginia State and at Central State, it was like being on the block, really. Right. Everybody looked like me. Everybody had the same circumstances for the most part. And I didn't have to fit in. That pressure was not there. And a lot of our kids don't understand, especially out where we're at, because most of our HBCUs are on the East Coast.
Right.
They don't even look at HBCU. But after they go and then they meet some of their peers that went to HBCU, they see a whole different experience.
Yep. That's what they talk about. So during the pandemic, man, they were livid because they realized how much they miss the experience. You know, that you can't put a price tag on what they see and feel and are able to talk about when they're on an HBCU campus. It's just different.
And the teachers are different. Listen,
that's right.
Hey, Kent, I was phys ed major. I must have failed kinesiology about 20 times. Mm-hmm. That teacher said, Mr. Nelson, you're not going nowhere until you pass this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to see to it that you pass it. Them other schools, you're just a number.
Yeah.
And I found that across HBCU land. It's just in the fabric.
Yep. Totally agree.
So in closing, what would you have to say to our community?
Well, I think in general, I would encourage your community to find a way to support an HBCU. Doesn't always have to be your money. And sometimes, something as simple as if you want to volunteer to work in career services, or if you work at a company, asking your company to be represented at Career Day, reaching out to the institution and find ways to make your mark. If you're getting rid of clothing, you'd be surprised. Instead of giving that to Goodwill or certain companies, give it to a campus where students could utilize it so that they can go and interview to better themselves. Then the final piece is to educate yourselves about themselves, your audience, about what's really happening at HBCUs versus folklore and some of the stuff you hear or see on social media or on news channels, because quite often they're quick to come out if something is wrong, not Cascade, but they're quick to come out if something is wrong. But when it's right, you can't find a way to get them to your campus to broadcast the great things that are happening. So just get involved and find out the facts about what's really happening, because the reality is Langston is not drastically different from other HBCUs. We're all doing similar work, and it's all about uplifting anyone who needs uplifting, regardless of how they look or the circumstances in which they come from. And if that's a value to you, which should be it's a human value, support an HBCU wherever you are, or find a way to get involved to support a student and help them to graduate.
Let me say this. This is what I tell to my white brethren.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, bro, you don't understand. You African. All man walked out of Africa, no matter what color you are, what your religion, you African. Mm-hmm. Go check the science out. Mm-hmm. And so all that division, we don't need that. You my brother.
Right. That's true.
Human family. And when we start teaching these things in our university, we'll have a better world. And in our grade schools, we have a better world. We won't have all this division. So in closing, as I always close on all my shows, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
The program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.